Criminal Code of Cambodia, 2009, Categories of Penalties. Book 2. Penalties. Title 1. Categories of Penalties. Chapter 1. Principal Penalties. Article 49. Principal Penalties. The principal penalties are of a prison term and a fine. The fine is expressed and paid in Riel. Article 50. The minimum and maximum of prison terms. When an offence is penalized for a prison term, the law sets a minimum and a maximum of jail term imposed. When an offence is penalized by a fine, the law sets a minimum and a maximum amount of fine imposed. Article 51. Increase and decrease of penalties. The minimum and maximum of prison term and of the fine may be increased or decreased, according to the conditions described by the present code. Article 52. Definition of a felony. An offence considered as a felony in the case where the maximum of the penalty for prison term imposed is 1. A life imprisonment, 2. An imprisonment for a period of more than 5 years and less than or equal to 30 years. The prison term may be accompanied by a fine. Article 53. Definition of misdemeanor. An offence considered as a misdemeanor is in the case where the maximum of the punishment for a prison term imposed upon is more than 6 days and less than or equal to 5 years. The punishment for a prison term may be accompanied by a fine. Article 54. Definition of petty crime. An offence considered as a petty crime is in the case where the maximum of the punishment for a prison term imposed upon is less than or equal to 6 days. The prison term may be accompanied by a fine. Article 55. Calculation of duration for prison term. A punishment for a one-day jail term is calculated as 24 hours. A punishment for a one-month jail term is calculated as 30 days. A punishment for more than one month jail term shall take into account the actual number of days of the month. A punishment for a one-year jail term is calculated as 12 months. Article 56. Separate conditions for terminating punishment. In principle, the convicted person whose punishment ends on Sunday or on public holiday shall be released on preceding day thereof. Article 57. Inclusion of duration of pretrial detention. The duration of pretrial detention is fully included in the duration of the punishment for a prison term to be served. Article 58. Incomes from fine. Incomes from fine are paid to the state budget. Chapter 2. Additional punishments. Article 59. Categories of additional punishment. The additional punishments are 1. Deprivation of some civil rights, 2. Prohibition from pursuing a profession when the offence was committed while carrying out this professional task, 3. Prohibition from the driving of all kinds of motor vehicle, 4. Confiscation of the driver's license, 5. Prohibition from taking a residency, 6. Prohibition from leaving the territory of the Kingdom of Cambodia, 7. For a convicted foreigner, the prohibition from entering and residing in the territory of the Kingdom of Cambodia, 8. Confiscation of any instruments, materials or objects which are used to commit the offence or are intended to commit the offence. 9. Seizure of the objects or funds which are intended to commit the offence, 10. Seizure of incomes or properties earned as a result from the offence, 11. Seizure of the utensils, materials and movable properties garnishing a premise in which the offence was committed, 12. Seizure of vehicles belonging to the convicted person, 13. Prohibition from having in possession of or carrying a weapon and ammunition, 14. Expelling from the public transactions or agreements, 15. Closure down of an establishment having served to prepare or to commit the offence. 16. Prohibition from the operation of business that is open to the public or used by the public, 17. Posting the decision of the sentence. 18. Publication in the newspapers of the decision of the sentence. 19. Broadcasting of the decision of the sentence, by all means of audiovisual communications. The separate provisions may constitute additional penalties. Article 60. Conditions for pronouncing additional penalties. The additional penalties may only be pronounced if they are specifically provided for the felony, the misdemeanor, or the petty crime imposed upon. The pronouncement of additional penalties may be optional. It may be mandatory if the law provides for expressively. Article 61. Civil rights that may be deprived. The civil rights that may be deprived as provided for in point 1 of Article 59, categories of additional penalties, includes 1. Rights to vote, 2. Rights to stand for election, 3. Rights to work in public function, 4. Rights to be designated as an expert, arbitrator, and proxy in court, 5. Rights to receive all official decorations, 6. Rights to serve as a witness under oath at court. This penalty may either be definitive or temporary for a duration of 5 years at the most. Article 62. Prohibition from pursuing a profession. The prohibition from pursuing a profession is not applicable to the exercising of an elective public mandate or trade union responsibilities. It is not applicable for the infraction to the law on press. This penalty may either be definitive or temporary for a duration of 5 years at the most. The court must specify the profession the pursuing of which is prohibited. Article 63. Prohibition from driving all kinds of motor vehicle. The prohibition from driving all kinds motor vehicles may not exceed 5 years. Article 64. Suspension of driving license. The penalty of suspension of a driver's license shall not exceed 5 years. The convicted person must hand over his/her driver's license to the court clerk of the court. The driver's license is kept according to the conditions specified by the procas of the Minister of Justice. Article 65. Prohibition from taking residency at certain places in Cambodia. The penalty of prohibition from taking residency is a prohibition imposed upon the convicted person from appearing in certain places in the territory of the Kingdom of Cambodia. This penalty may not exceed 10 years for a felony and 5 years for a misdemeanor. The court determines the list of prohibited places and the duration of the prohibition. The prohibition from taking residency consists of measures of surveillance. The convicted person must 1. Appear as summoned by the judicial authority or an administrative authority designated by the court. 2. Appear periodically at the office of the police or royal gendarmerie designated by the court. The court must determine the modalities of measures for surveillance. The decision made by the court must notify by the prosecutor to the Ministry of Interior and the Ministry of National Defense. Article 66. Prohibition from leaving the territory of the Kingdom of Cambodia. The prohibition from leaving the territory of Cambodia must not exceed 5 years. The convicted person must hand over his/her passport to the court clerk of the court. The passport is kept according to the conditions specified by procas of the Minister of Justice. The convicted person cannot, during the period of the penalty, apply for a passport. Article 67. Prohibition from entering and taking residency in the territory of the Kingdom of Cambodia for a convicted foreigner. The prohibition, for a convicted foreigner, from entering and taking residency in the territory of the Kingdom of Cambodia is either definitive or temporary for a duration of 5 years at the most. It entails a lawful expulsion of the convicted person at the end of the jail term. Article 68. Confiscation. Confiscation may be taken against the following objects. 1. Any instruments, materials, or objects which are used to commit the offence or are intended to commit the offence. 2. The objects or funds with which is the subject of the offence. 3. The incomes or properties earned as a result of the offence. 4. The utensils, materials, and the movable properties garnishing a premise in which the offence was committed. However, the confiscation cannot be pronounced if it affects the rights of the third parties. Article 69. Management of confiscated properties. At the time when the confiscation became definitive, the confiscated material things become property of the state unless the specific provisions designate different allocation. The state can proceed on selling or destroying the confiscated material things according to prescribed procedures for the selling of the property of the state. Article 70. Prohibition from having in possession of or carrying all kinds of weapon, explosive and ammunitions. Prohibition from having in possessing of or carrying a weapon, explosive and ammunition may be either definitive or temporary for a duration of 5 years at the most. It applies to weapons, explosive and ammunitions of all kinds in the Kingdom of Cambodia. Article 71. Expulsion from public transactions. Exclusion from public transactions entails banning from direct or indirect participating in all transactions or agreements proposed by 1. State, 2. A territorial, decentralized community, 3. A public establishment, 4. A state-controlled or concession enterprise or enterprise controlled by a territorial, decentralized community. The penalty of exclusion may be either definitive or temporary for a duration of 5 years at the most. Article 72. Closure of establishments. The penalty of closing down an establishment entails the prohibition from carrying out in this establishment the activity during which the offence has been committed. The penalty of closing down may be either definitive or temporary for a duration of 5 years at the most. Article 73. Prohibition from operating businesses in an establishment. The prohibition from operating businesses in an establishment open to the public or used by the public may be either definitive or temporary for a duration of 5 years at the most. Article 74. Posting of decision. The penalty of posting the decision is carried out in the places designated by and for a duration determined by the court. The posting may not exceed 2 months. The posting may be in full, by means of excerpt or simply by making references thereof. The fees for the posting are the burdens of the convicted person. In case of removal, concealment or ripping up of the affixed posting, the posting must be conducted again. The reposting must be paid by the person who had carried out an act of removal, concealment or ripping up of the affixed posting. Article 75. The publication in the newspapers of the decision of the sentence. The penalty of disseminating the court decision must be published in newspapers according to the modalities and duration set out by the court. The publication fee is the burden of the convicted person. In case of resistance, forced physical imprisonment may be imposed upon the convicted person. If the court orders the publication of the decision, the newspaper cannot refuse the publication. Article 76. Broadcasting of the sentence decision by means of audiovisual communications. The penalty of public broadcasting of the decision by all means of audiovisual communications is carried out according to the modalities set out by the court. The broadcasting may not exceed 8 days. The broadcasting may be in full, by means of excerpt or simply by making references thereof. The fees for the broadcasting are the burdens of the convicted person. Article 77. Duration of application of additional penalties. Except otherwise stated contrary in the decision of the court. The additional penalties mentioned in subpara 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the Article 59, categories of additional punishment, are carried out at the end of jail term.